Hello and welcome. This is Teresa Litchfield. I wanted to share a technique that results in the funnest and easy one-layer card. If you've ever had a happy accident, that's what this card was. A Touch of Whimsy video hop with Altenew features products that were released from the Whimsical Wonder collection a few days ago. Here are some of the other cards I made from that release, and I'll link to my blog post below if you'd like to learn more about those. I previewed a card in that release that was very different from the others while I was playing with one of the stamp sets. I was so excited how it turned out that I wanted to make a video showing the process in creating it. Here's the tie-dye motif stamp set. It has so many different options to make tie-dye looks, and here's the card I made for that release. I'm going to use the Cool Summer Nights ink set on this card, and I also use a gel plate to make the background. This is a 5x7 gel plate. The gel press comes with 2 acetate sheets in the packaging, and I'm just going to keep the one on the bottom next to my surface so I can turn it if I want to. I started out by using the sea glass ink and covered the whole gel plate with it. If you don't want it to shift around, you can always put it on something like a silicone mat. I then take my distress sprayer and spritz it about 3 times. I even like the drips that this sprayer gives. I then put my cardstock onto it, and this is 110 pound, and it can handle the water you spray on it just fine. I'm going to repeat the process again because I want to darken that up a bit with the sea glass ink. It's really fun to do this with the gel press plate, and I find it's really forgiving. Just remember, it does darken it up each time you do this. So I always start out with a really light ink so I can build up the color. And it does clean off really good with a baby wipe or a microfiber towel. Now I'm going to use a little bit of the dusk ink and rub that onto my glass mat. I'll spray that with some water. And then I'm going to use the metallic silver watercolor brush marker, and that'll just mute the color a bit. That marker comes from the Winter Wonderland set. And I'll add some water to that and mix that up. I'm using the number 4 round watercolor brush from Altenew for this next part. I'm going to take that ink mixture I just made and apply it to the gel press plate in circle patterns to mimic that tie-dye look. I start with the circle in the center of the plate and then try to press my cardstock into it so that it's centered. I thought it would be easier to make everything symmetrical, and you'll see why I did that as I go along. Now I'll make some half circles on each side of the center circle, and you can really see where that is in the center because of the metallic watercolor being part of the ink. I'll press my cardstock into that, and it's just so fun and unexpected to see what you get when you lift it up. Just like tie-dyeing, you never know quite what you're going to get out of it. I'm going to continue making circles on the 4 corners, and that'll end up just being only partial circles on the cardstock. But it'll still add to the symmetrical pattern of this. You could really use your imagination to come up with all kinds of fun designs and add lots of color to it. So again, I'll press my cardstock into the ink, and even though I've made that pattern, it still has that organic abstract look to it. Now I'm going to take the Desert Night ink and rub it onto my surface just like I did before, and again I'll add the metallic silver watercolor brush to it. I just liked how it muted the inks on the background so that when I stamped it, those would be the inks that would stand out brighter. I was also thinking that the metallic watercolor might show up, but you really don't see that. I'm placing this ink very similar to the ink color before, but it's going to give a very different result and also some depth of color to it. And I'm adding more of the pattern at the same time. You can also spritz it with water if you feel like it's a bit dry or just to get the ink moving. I only did the circle patterns in the center with this color. I didn't ink the 4 corners because I wanted it to be lighter when I stamped in that area. I just wanted to show that I used a stamp cleaner to clean off the metallic watercolor off of the gel plate. A couple of helpful things with this next step are I use Misti, and I use a sticky mat inside of mine, and I put a piece of 12 tape onto my magnet with an eyelet through it because I was tired of the washi tape tearing. So I've taken the background panel and centered it on the sticky mat so I can turn it. So you'll have to decide what you're going to use, but this is what I chose. I used the largest round shape in the stamp set, and I'm going to use it with Ocean Waves ink first. I place the stamp in the center of the background, and then I'm going to pick it up with the lid of my Misti. And then I'll ink it up and stamp it. And I actually do this twice, but I'm just showing it once for time's sake. I cleaned it off, and I'm going to move it to the side there. And this is where you're going to end up turning it. So I pick it up with the lid of my Misti and ink it up and stamp it. And then I'm going to flip that sticky mat around. So that's what makes this really helpful. And that's why I did a symmetrical design. Now I can ink it up again and stamp this side, and I didn't have to move the stamp. I'll take the next size down from the circle images in the stamp set, and I'll place that in the center. And I'll be using dusk ink this time to stamp them. And I'll pick that up with the lid of my Misti, ink it up, and stamp that. And again, I'll clean that off and then move it to the side and repeat just what I did on the first one. I've sped this up so you can still see all the steps I've done. So now I flipped it again, and it's just so neat that you can do that. Here's the third and final circle image, and I'll use dark night ink on this layer. So again, here's the center. And again, I move it to the right, stamp that, turn it, and do the other side again. Now to stamp the two ends of the background, I'll use one of the strip images, and there are 3 of them. I'm going to end up using 2 different ones, and they kind of look like kind of sketch marks to me, and I'll use that with the ocean waves. So I placed the one up a little bit higher. The second one is going to go in between that, and you'll see that. So I flip it around again, and I stamp it on the other end. Being able to flip the mat inside the Misti just makes it so easy. So I chose to use the other strip that I didn't use on the first card I made, which is that one on the top. So I'm going to use that one, and like I said, I put that in between that first stamp. And you know, if you ever get this on here, you don't like how it is, you can always take it off and reposition it every time, but it's super easy to be able to flip it around. So I stamped this layer with dusk ink, and again, I flip it around and do the other side. So I have to tell you, when I was creating this, it was just so fun to see everything come together, and I just couldn't believe what a simple technique it was. And I don't usually make simple cards, not on purpose. It just happens to be that this was a really simple one that turned out. The stamp set has some beautiful sentiments all about smiles, and so I'm going to use 2 of them made with a smile, and I love the font of the biggest word there, and I'm going to use the dark night ink and stamp that on the front, and I do it a couple times to make sure it's really dark. And then I use the embossing ink and then heat emboss it with clear embossing powder. I thoroughly enjoy using a gel press, and there are just so many different creative ways to use it. I hope you enjoyed my process of creating this card, and I encourage you to try this technique or any technique with the gel press. I have a couple more videos at the end that I use different techniques with the gel press also. The supplies I used are listed in the description below. And if you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate a thumbs up, and also would love it if you became a subscriber. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I hope you have a great day doing something you love.